Welcome, everyone, to We the Parents, episode 5, with my guest, who is a regional child support director. Goes by the name of Sara. Sara, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. So we got a few minute late start because we had every technical difficulty that one could possibly have between the program, between the hardware, between the microphone, between the camera. So we do have live comments that I want to stream up top. If anyone has any questions for Sara, this is kind of a cool thing because it's not often that anybody from the child support agency wants to chat about what's going on, especially with a non-custodial parent. So, Sara, tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously not too much. We want to kind of keep you, as anonymous as possible, but we do want you to be able to share your experience and, your years in the child support agency and what it is that you've sort of found and learned as you've been working in this field.
Absolutely. I have been doing this for almost a decade. I am a custodial parent. I am a custodial parent without a child support order. There are a lot of benefits that can be found, but it's a broken system. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed.
How long have you worked with the child support agency?
I have been with that division 9 years.
And so when you joined this career path or whatever, what made you work with social services and child support?
I have a need to help, and I have an incredible desire when I see a problem to offer some sort of intervention.
Right.
And that seemed like the most well-rounded agency to allow me to do so.
Right. So what was your original thought? You're going into this agency. You're a custodial parent yourself. What was your original thought on how this system functions and what its purpose is?
I understood the purpose. It makes perfect sense to me. Sometimes advocacy looks a little bit different than feel good. Sometimes it looks very legal, and sometimes it looks like dollars. I am a firm believer that the best thing for any child are for parents to co-facilitate the rearing of that child.
Right.
Sadly, in some instances, the only way that happens is in the financial regard. And I think that we get there in a couple of different ways, some with great dignity, others with less than great intentions.
Right. So tell us what a lot of people don't get to know about this stuff. I've spoken with a few agents in my last few years as an advocate. Tell me about the culture. What is it that you are taught as far as dealing with custodial, non-custodial parents? What's the culture, I guess is the word, in a child support agency?
We try to be very fair down the line, without partiality. We simply act as a mediator in a lot of instances who just happen to have the computer in front of us and we punch in numbers. We allow the dialogue to be between the two individuals, and we encourage them to be able to come up with something that they can agree with whatever issues they bring to the table. We remind them that we are limited when they start talking about custody or visitation. We don't have a say-so in that. It's outside of our hands. It's not that we don't want to, or that we don't think that that's a valuable thing. It's that we're prohibited from even engaging in that conversation.
Right. And I mean, to a degree, to a degree, that's understandable. What about, how do you feel? The child support is based on income. How long that's been, I don't know for sure. I believe it's since its existence. And from what I've been learning and listening to different various videos and specialist economists and stuff like that, why would child support not be, in your opinion, based on the true out of pocket costs, the economic costs of raising a child? What does, and we hear the excuse or the reason why is because we want that child to experience the same, I guess, comfort or financial comfort that he or she experienced with an intact family. That was good for like 1970 or 1960. But now we have, most parents are working jobs, both parents are working jobs. So why do you think that we still have a system that hasn't been reformed in so long? It's 2020. Women are, in fact, making as much, if not more, money than men in many, depending on the career. That statistic has been a little skewed, and the wording, everything's in the wording. If you pay
Sure.
attention, they're saying that women are still making less. Well, women are also not doing the same job. So when you're getting the average, I don't know a lot of women that work on oil rigs, and I don't know a lot of women that drive trucks, and I don't know a lot of women that are brain surgeons, and I don't, not that any of these things, but you have to look at what it is men and women do before you go, oh, women are underpaid or this and that. So, but besides that, I don't want to get too into that. Why are we talking about income when it comes to child support and not the true out of pocket costs of raising a child?
Well, I think for starters, that out of pocket cost is different for each and every family. Um, and that is based on the income of the family. You can have an intact family um, who are able to provide one type of lifestyle for their child compared to another intact family with maybe different jobs and educational backgrounds and other variables that are able to provide a different lifestyle for their child.
Right.
So you're not comparing across the board children. You're talking about the lifestyle that the child in your home would have, did have, could continue to have. And when we do talk about those income ratios, note that most of the states have adopted the federal guidelines that require both incomes to be calculated, not just the non-custodial parents.
Right. What would you think? So here's how it works. I mean, I can show you a graphic if I had loaded it earlier of what I pay in child support, which is almost 50% of my income. Now, for someone who's not making, that's all good and dandy. If you're making a couple $100,000 a year, you can still live fairly well on $100,000 a year. If you're making $50,000 a year and you're paying $25,000 a year, it's hard to live on $25,000 a year. If you're making $21,000 a year, a lot of the median income is anywhere between $28,000 and $38,000. Nobody can. So when you delegate a child to one home, then you basically say, all right, well, that the custodial parent's going to have most time with the child. So they're going to need expenses covered. So you got a house, you got this, that, and the other thing. All of these expenses typically would be, if you didn't have a kid, you'd need a house to live in, like you'd have rent. Granted, it's a little bit more, maybe a few $100s a month if you have a larger home with extra bedrooms versus a one bedroom house or something like that. But it's really not a big offset in expense. It's electricity, these things, the groceries. I did live with my own children for a while, and I paid all the bills, and even supported their mother for a while. And I can tell you that yes, kids are expensive. The biggest thing is probably medical costs, and if you have insurance, that's an important thing to have. But other than that, if you essentially give the child to one parent, and then you're taking anywhere between 25, 40%, 50% of another parent's income, how is that other parent? And every time I've asked an agent before, except for you, has told me, well, it's about the best interest of the child. Work another job. But I could afford my kids when I worked one job. I didn't need the state to tell me how to take care of my kids. What happened in my case was their mother filed for state benefits when we broke up. Well, that immediately put me on child support. And once I was on child support, I figured out it was very difficult to get off of it, while also fighting for custody. And the hardest part, too, is when you're paying half your income to child support. It's also financially difficult to afford an attorney to represent you in a custody case. So it seems like the order of operations of this is backwards. Do you think that that's engineered that way? Do you think that it sort of was created with good intent and has sort of become a bureaucratic money maker for the social services industry and the because you have to get paid, right?
Absolutely.
All the money doesn't come from taxes.
No.
And this isn't a dig at you by all means, because obviously you're here to chat and help with us. But we do want to have a full disclosure conversation about what are the realities of what this money is doing. So
absolutely. And let me just say that in your questions, you've now opened the door not only to one broken system, but now three.
right.
Child support is a broken system. All systems are broken. And it is not perfect. I do believe the original intent was good. The second broken system, if we're really candid, is most states allow for a deviation of the child support, meaning when we put the number into the computer and it spits out what that child support payment should look like according to the data that we've entered. Most states allow for the custodial and the non-custodial parent to have a conversation and determine whether or not they agree or disagree with that figure.
Right.
And so that system being broken, in my opinion, is the larger issue. I was just having a discussion with a friend the other day, and we basically came down to so many situations would be solved if we as parents, whether custodial or non-custodial, could learn to love for and care for our children more than we dislike, disagree, or want to punish another adult.
Right. Well, and that's the problem. I mean, we are dealing with an imperfect world, so we're looking for systems to help with the human factor, the human flaw factor. And unfortunately, if that system's also flawed or broken in any way, or has bad intent or ill will, usually it's going to wreak havoc. Now, if you have a high conflict situation, a lot of these cases that we're specifically talking about are usually with, when you talk about parental alienation and all those things and family court and custody battles, usually the parents are having issues with figuring out their own custody arrangement, they're also going to have issues with money.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is when you have someone that might not be the healthiest of people emotionally or mentally, and because we have to remember that the child support agency and the family court system, these judges, attorneys, they're not psychologists. They're not medical professionals. They don't know anything about. They're not really educated on parental alienation. They don't recognize any of these behaviors. The child support agency doesn't really get into any of that. So what you said earlier before was that you guys aren't even allowed to talk about custody.
No,
Everyone's not allowed to talk about the other thing that has to do with the other thing. So everything is connected, but it's not. But it is. And
right.
so it's a system of we don't talk about them, or we don't talk about custody, and custody doesn't talk about child support, and nobody talks about anything. And while no one's talking about anything, that's where everything's getting lost. And
Absolutely.
the true best interest of a child is to have the parents present. Now, I do want to bring up my buddy Daniel Quigley. He's watching on Facebook, and if he's still watching, Daniel, feel free to comment. But he did have a question for you, and Daniel had a video. I actually reached out to him. He's going to be on the show. He's a non-custodial father I think he said he's been fighting for 9 years. And he said that you mentioned that the system is not functioning properly. What changes do you think would help most? To what extent should changes be made? And I believe that question's for you, Sara.
When we talk about the broken system, starting at the relational level between the two parents, we then have to discuss what you also mentioned in terms of the broken system, the third part of that, which would be the states are a business. You
Right.
mentioned if someone is receiving benefits. Well, yeah, the state is great. They're going to come through and they're going to assist you
Mm-hmm.
until there's a way to get their money back.
Right.
And then they become a business and a debt collector, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Right.
As soon as those pieces are brought into the negotiation, at that point, negotiation ceases. You're not going to be able to have a discussion with the other person and determine if you're willing to go to a different number than what the computer spit out. Because if
Right.
someone is receiving those benefits, it now is a non-negotiable.
Let's talk
So
about
when
what
the
that
state
is.
becomes a business
Mm-hmm.
and it starts taking away the communication factor, if one
Mm-hmm.
is even in place between the parents, in my opinion, we have now damaged the child because
Right.
everything, absolutely everything that is beneficial for the child stems back to, can mom and dad care more about me than they do disliking each other?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a setup, it's a cycle. So these courts are creating damaged children by not recognizing the child's best interest. When we say that, I'm going to say it, the child's best interest seems to be about the state's best interest. And I have a
Okay,
big problem with that. I think you do too. And that's why
of course.
we're speaking right now. And I want to encourage anyone that's watching, to start fighting back for sure. Start speaking out, start recording things, start making messages, making videos, start speaking to your legislators, start speaking to your agents, talk to anyone, police officers, talk to everyone. I do it every day. I can go to Walmart and speak to somebody about this stuff. This has always been like a hush hush subject. Divorce and infidelity and child support, custody battles and addiction, and I messed up, and no one wants to talk about their their discretions within a relationship that ends. So what they do is they don't talk about the abuse that's occurring after the relationship because they don't want the negativity that was within the relationship necessarily to come to light. And it's difficult as a father, the piece of paper says I'm non-custodial. That doesn't mean squat to me. Like the way I look at it is I've allowed this to happen because I'm seeking a peaceful resolution to advocate for my children.
Mm-hmm.
But would you agree, and I don't even know if I've asked you this before, that without the legality and the fact that these are legitimate agencies of the state and all that, what this country and other countries have done is created an industry of child trafficking and extortion through custody, divorce, and family courts, CPS, foster care, all these branches of the social services and family law industry, where there's a lot of revenue coming in, not only to pay the bills, but also to fatten pockets, to pay bonuses, to do a lot of nasty things that we're using the term child's best interest. I can tell you just from my experience and thousands of parents that I've spoken with, and there's millions, that none of this is in the best interest of our children.
Well,
The
Chris,
science,
let me address that for a second, because I
yeah,
think this will also speak to the question that Daniel had asked. When these services were put into place, they were not put into place for parents such as yourself or
right,
myself. They were put in place for individuals who either wanted zero responsibility of ever having created a child, or
right,
they went in the other direction and absolutely are abusive. I mean, just torturous to their children.
right,
And these agencies were developed and put into place to handle those circumstances. But then as populations grow and needs grow, you can't be a social services agency and not provide services to others who say they need you.
right,
But it's when you get far away from the original intent that it then becomes poisonous. Um, you, me, we're not the parents that child support agencies were designed for.
right,
We're not the parents that protective service agencies were designed for. We're not the parents that most of these services, and I'll keep calling it services, even though I do realize that they might be for some, but they might be something completely different, like a weaponized tool
right,
against others.
right,
Um, so we have to know that, and we have to know that as soon as we got past the point of serving the clients from those perspectives, that's when all sorts of other things come into play. And when you're
right,
working with humans, you're going to be working with things like greed, loopholes,
manipulation,
for sure. I was going to call it maybe a shadow of integrity, but yeah,
right,
um, that's how you get there, and that's where that stems from. And there is absolutely no best interest of a child when you use a system to work against the people who are supposed to be working for the child.
right,
And that's where it becomes incredibly broken. And as much as you as a father hurt
mm-hmm.
all of the time, or the victimized other parent who just can't get so and so to do anything that they need them to do with these kids hurts. No one hurts
Right,
as much as a child. who has to sit there and listen to one parent talk about what the other one doesn't do, won't do, can't
Mm-hmm.
do, how sorry they are.
Right.
And there are so many pieces of everything that we're seeing in the world that tie into all of this. Um, the lack of the masculine influence on our children is
Mm-hmm.
devastating.
Right.
It is
Fatherlessness.
not okay.
Right.
We are
Well,
creating a society that's losing its ability to function.
well, let's talk about that a little bit. Why do you think that is? There are clearly a list of policies that have been created in the last 50 to 60 years. Um, Even from, and we talked about this a little bit over the phone, that men and women are abusive, yet society um, basically wraps all men up as abusive, and women are victims. That's the overall consensus of culture. You
It
speak
is.
individually to people. Individually, people like you and I can say, "Hey, you've had this experience, but I've had this experience." You know, we're on opposite sides of the spectrum, and we can both go. Yeah, it happens to both of us. It happens differently. It might look different. I'm being abused in and out. No, I'm not being physically abused. I'm being every other abused, and it's including my children. My children are being abused right now. Make no mistake about that. Um, you know, you had your experience, which you may or may not want to share, but what we need to do here is have a system that understands the dynamics of the situation instead of just it's a cookie cutter system. They're just going into work every day, the agents, the lawyers, the judges, and it's literally just like, you know, like punching a clock and working on that assembly line and doing the thing, and then they don't, you know, you may be, and others may be conscious of literally every time you make a decision about someone's finances, someone's custody, someone's whatever, and I know you guys don't deal with custody, what that does to a society on a large scale, and we're talking about fatherlessness.
Sure.
And we you know, we're always fighting over these domestic violence groups and these women that grew up as young girls and their fathers were this and that and the other thing, and it's this cycle. So unless people start realizing that they're a product of a cycle and then step out of it and go, okay, I'm an individual who had experiences, but I don't have to judge men and I don't have to judge women. But what I need to do is look at the problem from an, you know, a higher altitude and pull back and go, there's something happening here, and we're being steered, I believe, like cattle, to where it's a nanny state. We're becoming a welfare state of this is not what America was meant to be. The fatherlessness is a crisis. It's way worse than COVID. I like to go on record and say that as much as possible. When you talk about the amount of lives, the millions and millions and millions, we're talking 20 plus million lives just in this country of kids growing up absent their biological father. You know, not all so, incarceration rates. These kids growing up without that male figure. What's happening with our boys, with our young men, where there's an absence of a positive influence of a male role model. I'm told is that all men are crap, and that's not true. Some men are crap, some women are crap. You know, it's. I don't think we need to. Well, it's not really up for debate anymore. Um, when you get into things like fatherlessness, and we know the things that it causes, the behavioral issues, the post-traumatic stress disorder, the ADHD, you know, different all these factors. Why are we to me, it's like, all right, well, we're the generation with the young kids. We're recognizing this behavior. We've done studies on it. We have the information. Why aren't child support agents, judges, attorneys? Why isn't everyone speaking out like you? Why aren't we going, oh, well, we know this is bad, so let's do something about it?
The same reason why you have a blank avatar for me versus looking at me.
Right.
This is scary. The
Right.
machine that eats you is the machine that feeds my child.
Right.
There are problems,
Right.
and
The
there are
one that
problems
has.
that need to be addressed, but
Now say
it
that
has,
again. Say that again for me. And we're both on this broadcast together. So that's an interesting thing that you said. So the same machine or the same system that has me broadcasting to you live from my dad's house. Not that it's not a nice house. I'm not out living on the street, but I do have most of my income taken away in this battle, as well as not only child support, but for to fight for custody. And I can't afford even my own place to live. Um, so the same system that destroys me and my kids is the one that you're surviving off of. Because, and in your case, not as just a custodial parent, but as an employee of the state who
right.
who gets paid through the opportunity to collect money from me.
The opportunity to try.
Well, I don't know too many. Let's talk, we can chat about that too. So when you say, what do you mean by try?
We can place you under a child support order,
Uh-huh.
and there are some enforcement remedies, but those remedies are, people dodge them every day.
Mm,
Now, to me, that would be an incredibly unhealthy way to live,
right.
constantly looking over your back, but it happens.
Right.
But it will never be because your local child support agent comes knocking on your door, because that's not a part of our role. Once we help mediate that order, all we do is sit and go to the next court. Um,
R-
we do it again,
Yeah.
and
Kevin
we do it.
said. Kevin
Yes,
said, yeah, it's called jail. How absolutely absurd are the repercussions for non-payment of child support? Do you know that I read a few articles the other day, and this isn't a men and women thing. I'm sort of trying to give a comparison of what we're talking about with our culture and how we view men a certain way and women a certain way. And because we've created this biasness of what culture believes, it's allowing for systems to be abusive to either or. So there was a woman in it was an article, I forget what state it was. I've shared it a few times, who was convicted of statutory rape. Of She's a teacher, and we hear about this often. This isn't something that's not common. Female teachers with young boy students, and these women are getting probation for statutory rape. 16-year-old boy,
ridiculous.
24, 25-year-old woman, 22-year-old woman, 16-year-old boy. She goes in, she gets probation. She might get, you know, uh, t- temporary leave of absence. I don't know. She may have lost her job, and then gets, you know, however many years of probation, unsupervised, something like that. And men are being locked up not only for the unwillingness to pay child support, but the inability to pay child support because the system has put them on such a high child support regimen
Hmm.
that they would be homeless on the street, you know,
And I
or
am so glad that you brought up ability to pay.
right.
So One thing that I wish that the child support agencies across the nation were better at, and I'm not sure if it's just because they don't or they can't in
Hmm.
each state, but that's to provide education.
Right.
Um, each person, each party of each case needs to be educated about the system. This is what it is that we do. This is what we can do for you. This is what happens if it does not go as planned, meaning if child support is not paid. And this is how those things happen. Um,
Right.
your child support agency does have certain enforcement remedies,
Hmm.
but in all states, they don't hold all the cards.
Right.
For example, in my state and several states surrounding, the child support agency does not actually incarcerate.
No,
That's
the
a
courts
court
do.
function. That's a court function that they pull up based on their own contempt records that they keep for failure to pay. But
Right.
one of the things that I would want to educate individuals on when they get that notice that they are behind and that they have a contempt hearing, what usually happens at that point is they get scared because they're afraid, okay, I'm going to go see the judge and I'm very likely going to go to jail. Then
Hmm.
I lose my job and I lose all my future ability to pay. And then wind up with a huge balance that I also have to take care of. And I'm going to be down a rabbit hole. So then they go to everyone they've ever known and borrow enough money to pay out of the situation for that moment.
Exactly. Exactly. And
But
that's not fair to do to other people too.
it's not. But what I wish that they knew is that getting in front of that judge is one of the best things that they could do, because there is a change that has been made over the last several years. And it stems from a case that worked its way all the way to the Supreme Court simply because the gentleman, in this case, the non custodial parent, was a father and he fought it. And it was, I get behind, you lock me up, I lose my job,
I
I
get
get further
behind.
behind, and
Right.
I become even more unemployable.
Makes no sense.
Right. So, stemming from that situation, judges now have an obligation to look at ability to pay. It's not something that can happen at the child support agent level. It absolutely has to happen in the courtroom because it happens at the judge level.
Hmm.
But they have to be able to document that whatever outcome that occurs that day in that courtroom is because they have assessed the reality of the non custodial parent's ability to pay.
Right. Let's talk about during COVID here, especially Ryan Goodwin, who's a follower of the show, and myself. COVID job loss ignored by the state. Let's talk about what COVID did, which is, again, COVID didn't do it. Okay, our governors made the decision to lock us up and make all these mandates that are really unlawful anyway. But I don't like to blame COVID. COVID didn't do this crisis, this financial crisis, this unemployment crisis. This was your government that did this, and it wasn't to protect you; it was to control you. I do like to let my libertarian out a little bit, but
Thank you.
yeah. So COVID job loss. How many in your neck of the woods, in your experience during this crisis, there were a lot of non-custodial parents with an inability to pay
Absolutely.
that were locked up. So when you mentioned that, obviously judge's discretion seems to be superseding law, and I can speak from myself personally, um, that I had lost my jobs when COVID hit. I had two jobs, and at the time, they were both restaurant jobs, of course. So I had to file for unemployment, and unemployment took a while to get. to me
Hmm.
took about, not only filing but then receiving, took up to 8 weeks. I received a letter in the mail from the agency, and they were asking for 4 months worth of back child support, which for me was 1150 a month
Wow.
times four.
Right.
So I had just received $5,800. I got a lump sum of unemployment for those past, um, I think it was 10 weeks by the time I got it, or whatever it was. And so I got a contempt letter, and the letter stated, if you pay this, you do not have to attend court. It says it in the letter. Then I spoke with my agent, same thing. Um, and so I wasn't happy about having to pay, but I didn't want to go to court at this time. From a strategic aspect of it, I just wanted to avoid court. So I paid it. I didn't pay my car payment. Keep in mind, all my other bills are behind. Cell phone, car payment. My car went into repossession during this time. Can't pick up my kids for my every other weekend that the wonderful state of North Carolina allows me to see my kids when I don't have a vehicle. And that also looks bad when my car goes into repossession, when I'm fighting for custody, when I don't have a car. So
Right.
you see the rabbit hole of nonsense. It's absurd. Definitely need to work with our legislators, who happen to be mostly attorneys, who've created this industry for themselves.
Well, I
But
would like you to repeat that one sentence again.
the rabbit hole,
No,
attorneys,
the legislators.
legislators,
Uh-huh.
so a large portion, not all, because I do work with some really good legislators. Just because they were voted in doesn't mean they're good people. Just putting that
Right.
out there. A gentleman that I work with directly is a very good person. He's a teacher and a father and a grandfather, and he has a good moral compass. And there's a lot of self righteous SOBs in our legislator, and a lot of them are attorneys, and they've created industry for themselves using law. So law is the new mafia, so to speak. But it looks official because, like we said, it's a law. So a law that's abusive is okay, is basically what this country says. And I disagree. And I would say most Americans would disagree, but again, they're not willing to stand up and change it quite yet.
Now
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, so I'll just finish up what I was. So long story short, the agent asked for $4,600. I went ahead and agreed to pay it. And that was on a Monday morning. Court was supposed to be on a Friday. So I went ahead and paid it over with a credit card. It went to Raleigh. So it cleared. They told me it cleared on a Wednesday. So Friday by court, they should have been able to see that a payment had been made. However, they told me that, well, Wednesday we check the all the payments that have cleared for court on Friday, and yours hadn't gone through yet. And I said, okay, that's understandable. But you'd think that I'm not the only one that's paid with a credit card who was probably late, and this is the same thing that happened to them, where they might have had to go and check back later on to see if it cleared. So I didn't go to court Friday because I was told I didn't have to, because I made the payment, had the receipt, all that good stuff. Tuesday morning, the following week, a sheriff deputy came and picked me up for not non-compliance but failure to appear. I showed him the letter, showed him the receipt. He brought me in. I knew this sheriff's deputy on a semi-personal level, and brought me in, and they continued to book me. The magistrate continued to book me. I explained my case. I had my kids that weekend. They were going to hold me there to speak to a judge on Friday. So I just paid $4,600. I had just done. Let's forget the fact that me paying child support at all is BS, because I'm willing to raise my own kids. No one had to force me to take care of my kids. All I did was break up with their mother. Okay, she's the one who needs benefits. So But besides that, sorry for that little, I had a little rant tangent.
No, you good.
So besides that, you know, I paid the money. I find myself in jail. I've explained it to an officer, a magistrate. I've asked to speak to the agent who I was detained at the time, so I couldn't speak with my child support agent. So my father had to go speak with that agent, and that agent wouldn't speak to him because they legally can't.
Right.
And well, then come talk to me. No one, you don't even have to speak to him. Listen to what he's telling you. You guys made a mistake. There's an issue. Can you help us? Nope. Nobody helped me. Nobody helped me until I made 100 phone calls while I was in a jail cell and freaking out. I had my kids that weekend, and daddy was going to be in jail after paying $4,600. So now am I not only extorted, broke, I'm locked up for no reason. I'm pleading my case to adults, right? To adults of the justice system. Nobody would help me, not until I had to pay $500 for an attorney to tell them they need to let me loose. Then they let me out the next morning, but they kept me in jail overnight. That's the first time I've ever been to jail. Um,
That is so much a part of the education that I wish that the child support agency did a better job of sharing.
well, here's what the
I
agent told me when I told her this story. And she said, yeah, that happens sometimes, and that's unfortunate.
No, it's not unfortunate. It
I said,
is
yeah.
an abomination.
I said, it's unfortunate that I went to jail and after not only paying $4,600, so you took my money and locked me up. And it's unfortunate. I almost want to say, how about you go to jail? Let me take your kids, your money, and throw you in jail. Tell me how unfortunate that feels.
And that is exactly the mindset that causes me to be here right now, regardless of how scary it is. This is not okay. This is
No,
not unfortunate. And to be dismissed as, oh, that's unfortunate, is as equally grueling as what you endured. Um, if I could convey anything from your story to all that are watching or listening right now, that is, do not put the matters of your life in anyone else's hands and trust it. So
right.
when you pay that lump sum and you had that receipt in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
fax that everywhere. Fax it over to your clerk of court, fax it to your agent, fax it, email it, get it to everyone. Because there are going to be computer loopholes, but there should not be human sacrifice loopholes.
I would say after I understand the miscommunication, but when a sheriff's deputy came that morning and communicated with me, and I was still, completely compliant. I understood he had a court order by the judge to bring me in. So I complied and I said, we'll just straighten this out. No problem. And he was very pleasant. And I couldn't be heard. They put me in the cell as if I belonged there. And I explained to them, just go talk to the judge. Well, we can't talk to the judge till Friday. That's child support day. I said, are you kidding me? Do you know that all of these people in here, I'm not a criminal. You made a mistake. I'm proving it to you right now in front. You have evidence. And you're acting like I'm not here, like I'm not speaking to you. And I want to be like, do you guys know you work for me? The judge works for me. You guys work for me. Your salaries are paid through tax dollars. We have a problem with authoritative systems and the state and judges and attorneys thinking that they are in charge of our children. Their job is to protect our children, not to create scenarios to pretend like they're protecting them while they profit off of them.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely.
So let's talk about, because it was mentioned a few times, And Michael wants to know who Sarah is. And I just skipped past Michael's comment, but Michael said, who is Sarah? Sarah is a regional child support director. Michael Harbin. Michael Harbin, who are you? Let us know.
And someone
So,
asked earlier about the COVID impact. Again, I cannot speak for every state because from state to state, the child support agencies do function slightly different. But for the majority of the states, there was a lot of enforcement actions that were put to sleep for the time being. Obviously, they did not occur as soon as the pandemic did. I don't think anyone saw a pandemic coming. So it did not get put into place as quickly as it needed to.
right.
But in terms of license suspension, it took a little bit longer for the contempt hearings, which are what can lead to jail time, to be relaxed, but that's a different entity. But for most states, the enforcement remedies were put to sleep for a time being. They are just now beginning to come back into play in all the states that I'm familiar with. They're not quite as stringent. They're kind of coming back in stages a little bit.
Right.
But definitely, again, education, education, education. Contact your state, find out what they're doing, what their timeframes are, how they're maneuvering through getting up and going again. And most states are not even fully in office yet. Most states still have their agents working remotely. But even through that, because let me address one part of what they told you, which is we can't talk to the judge. It's not child support day. We talk to the courts every single day.
I knew that.
I have multiple counties in my region that I'm responsible for. And I am communicating, whether it's by email or phone or fax, with our courts daily,
Right.
even when working remotely.
Right.
Daily.
Yeah.
That's just bull.
The agent, the magistrate, and even the officer, he was going along with whatever he was told. But they're like, we'll try to get a hold of the judge, but you may have to be in here till Friday. So I'm innocent, right? I didn't break the law. There was a misunderstanding, and I did what I was supposed to, and I had evidence in hand. And they were going to keep me in jail till Friday until I hired an attorney. The agents wouldn't speak to my father. They wouldn't speak to me. They didn't have to speak to him. They heard him and they didn't address it. They heard him and just said, we can't speak to you.
That is another piece. If anyone finds themselves in a situation where they cannot make the contact themselves and someone has to communicate with those entities for them, oftentimes the language that they use is they'll come into the office and say, I need to talk to you about my son's case or my daughter's case. That's absolutely the wrong language, because the very first thing that you're going to hear is, you're not a party to the case. We cannot discuss anything with you.
Right.
Change that dialogue from the get-go. Hi, I need to give you some information.
Right.
Because you're exactly right. We can receive information. We can't give it to you, but we can receive it. And if you let us know we're receiving something,
right,
versus I need to talk to you, because I need to talk to you is just lay terms for I need to get information from you. So just change the dialogue and instruct anyone that may have to speak to anyone on your behalf to change their dialogue. Those simple words really can make a difference in terms of being heard.
Right.
And also, like I spoke a moment ago about Don't leave anything in human hands that you don't follow up on. If you've got a receipt, make sure you're faxing that to people. That also counts with your employer. If you
Mm-hmm.
are on wage garnishment, that counts there as well. I had a telephone call from a gentleman the other day. He was literally on the verge of tears, it sounded
Yeah.
like. He was at his job.
Mm-hmm.
He had been paying his child support through wage garnishment. He was behind. We weren't showing any payments had been received for
Wow.
quite a while. And they literally were standing there wanting to terminate him because his license was being revoked
Uh-huh.
for failure to pay. And if he
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a license, he couldn't perform the job.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately started, working with different entities trying to figure out what's going on. Why aren't we showing payments? What's happening? Um, Come to find out, we kind of tracked it back down, had him have his payroll department contact us. They were deducting his child support.
Mm-hmm.
They just weren't sending it to us.
Where was it going?
It was sitting there. And so by the
Oh.
end of the day, they forwarded us all the payments. So they were literally going to terminate him for failure to pay child support, was a result, was going to result in his license being suspended, which was going to cost him his job. And the same individuals that were going to fire him were the ones who had not sent in months,
Right.
months worth of child support payments that they had deducted. And he sent over paycheck stubs
Right.
because I told him, I was like, email me what you've got. Just send me some documentation so that I can get to work. He
Mm-hmm.
sent it over. There are the deductions. And 4 hours later, we're getting a call from payroll going, oh, well, I've got it right here for you.
Wow.
Well, okay. Did you think it was gonna by osmosis? Like,
Yeah.
what did you think was gonna happen? So trust no one, because at the end of the day, this truly does affect your entire life. And if
Mm-hmm.
it affects your life, then by proxy, it affects your child.
Right. We think, the courts and everybody seems to think that a parent, one parent being abused is okay because it's in the best interest of the child that that parent is struggling. And I can tell you that no child wants their mom or dad hurting. So if we have a system designed that's doing that, and when these adults like myself or that gentleman come to the agency, you don't know what we're dealing with. You don't know the fact that you have a child support amount on me that is burying me. And then you say, well, take it up with the judge and take it up. Everyone's just sending everybody to somebody else, and literally, people are committing suicide
Yes.
because of this, or they're drinking themselves to death, hoping they can just either numb it or die.
And this is where your legislators come in. It is your legislators that actually set the vote for those guidelines. And
Right.
when I say the word guidelines, if you've gone to child support court, if you have been placed under an order, then you know that when you meet with an agent, they collect some basic information from both sides. What is your income? How many children do you have? Do you have other children that live with you? Are any of the children in this case particularly sickly with exacerbated medical costs? Do we have
Mm-hmm.
daycare in play? Very basic information.
You know what's
And then,
funny? Where is that listed? Is that information listed somewhere? Literally, my children's mother has almost touched on every one of those factors somehow, whether it be medical, whether it be daycare, whether it be, um, seeking other diagnoses for diseases my kids don't have, behavioral disorders, and all kinds of things. But literally, those things, is that like a checklist somewhere that like you can Google that information? Because it was just so
most
odd.
states,
Everything you were saying was everything I was dealing with.
most states will have a child support agency website and
Mm-hmm.
a guideline calculator
So you
should
can
be
look
on
that
there,
up.
and you can look and see exactly what gets factored in.
Yeah,
Um,
their mother is a Googler.
Now, I will say that there are also requirements for those things. For example, you can't just claim that you pay daycare. You have to be able
Right.
to show that you pay daycare. And if you're
Sure.
paying daycare, let's say your aunt watches the children for you. Good. Then your aunt needs to send in a notarized letter stating how often she keeps the children, what her charge is for keeping the children, and what the payment is. Because, like with a lot of bills, the charge and the payment can be different. We
Right.
all get behind on things that we need to pay.
Yeah.
Um, and by sending it in notarized, that puts that individual in a position that they do not want to be caught in a perjurious situation.
Right.
Um, Now, does that necessarily obliterate the possibility that there is perjury happening? No. But again,
Right.
how do you police every single thing? At least you've got something. And then if that can be proven to be not factual, then we have another direction to go in. But
Yeah.
it's not just so and so said that they pay X amount of dollars in daycare or X amount of dollars in extra expenditures and medically. And
Hmm.
when we talk about extra expenditures medically, we're not talking about my child is ADHD and takes a medication that I
Hmm.
have to refill monthly. We're
Hmm.
talking about someone with a very sick child who truly incurs some cost. And I pray no one listening is going through this, but
Yeah. No, I
childhood
had
cancer, sickle
when I
cell,
when I was younger,
no,
I had a chronic kidney disease, and so I was in the hospital monthly.
gotcha.
You know,
Yeah,
so
that
that was an expense. So I
right.
understand that those are factors. Um, what I
But,
do want to cover, because we're at the top of the hour, and I try
okay,
not to make these shows too long because I want people to watch them. But you will definitely come back. I'd like to have you on regularly,
sure.
so that we can keep talking about these things. And it's nice to have a agent in the field, so to speak, especially one who's going to, at least put themselves out there. There's a lot of people on here that have said thank you for coming on, and I understand
Sure.
it has to be in a limited capacity, and maybe one day we're gonna have you on video here, and we're just gonna be balls to the wall, um, uh, you
One
know,
day.
screaming from the rooftops. But we do appreciate you on here. I want to talk about briefly for the next few minutes your understanding of Title 4D funding.
Okay.
So we talked about it briefly. I don't know. I may have sent you some things to listen to. I think I did,
You did.
about how that works. If you were able to take a look at it, it's something that I didn't know about. And to me, Title IV funding is a clear conflict of interest when it comes to custody battles and child support. And not every state, there are some states, including, I don't know how many, but I know Georgia is one of them when it comes to child support and custody being the same in the same jurisdiction. So they handle those matters together, but a lot of state courts don't. They keep it separate. So you can't talk about one and the other. So let's talk about Title 4D. What is your understanding of it?
Title 4D is a portion of the Social Security Act that helps to fund the child support entity.
Hmm. Including other social services, correct?
Yes, and there are other titles that tie into other divisions,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
4D is
same way.
specifically what works for child support.
Correct. So there's there's money that comes in that pays judges. There's money that comes in that pays different entities of social services, all that good stuff. Basically, lots of money coming in, all kinds of money, funding, and all that good stuff.
Sure.
So Title IV is a federal incentivized funding
It
where
is.
I know for the state of North Carolina, because my legislator sent me the information. I believe, we're talking millions of dollars
Yes.
in state funding, and it's based on child support enforcement performance. Now, could you describe for our audience a little bit better? I think I have a general understanding of what those words mean. Could you tell me what that means?
It is much like a child earning an allowance by completing their chore chart.
Okay.
There are very set tasks, so to speak, um, that if you do them well,
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe you could use the word quota,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
the agency receives an incentive. Now, let me
Right.
just throw the disclaimer out here
Sure.
before everyone gets really angry at their independent agents.
We're already angry.
Your agents that you're getting on the phone, your regional directors, they're not seeing this money. This is money that might come to the agency,
Mm-hmm.
but it does not go to these individuals that are actually frontlining, handling your cases.
What's a
Um,
child support agent make? Just curious. Like a typical agent.
in the states surrounding mine, it is anywhere between 28 to 34 a year.
So, okay, salary 20 to 34,000 a year. So a basic median salary,
Hmm.
which is what we talked about roughly. Yeah. Okay. So no one's getting rich off this. What are some requirements for the agency?
Establishing paternity,
Mm-hmm.
um, establishing medical support, obviously getting a child support order, a monetary order.
When you say establishing paternity, does that mean that you're required to only put men or women on child support who actually or biologically belong to the children?
Yes.
Because I hear paternity fraud's pretty easy in most states, and
I,
that a lot
I
of times they'll
cannot,
just slap a man's name on a child support order that may or may not be the father.
I cannot fathom that situation.
Oh, it exists.
Oh,
It's
I'm
one of
sure it
those.
does. I
Yeah, it's
can't
one of those
fathom it.
things that. Yeah, it's one of those things that's allowed in our states. I don't think. And I have a gentleman who's in this movement. His name's Carnell Smith. And I'm going to have him on, and he's sort of a paternity fraud expert. He dealt with it himself, where he was paying an exorbitant amount of child support for children that weren't even his. Even after he proved it, they didn't care. They kept him paying.
That is obscene to even think of. Because pretty much, like, we have to have legal paternity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that is only available in a couple of ways in my state and several others surrounding me. Because again, I cannot speak for the entire nation. There are some nuances throughout the nation, and I honestly just do not know the requirements in each state. But for the most part, legal paternity is established prior to the child support setting by
Right.
either marriage, a child that is conceived during the dates of a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
um, paternity acknowledgments, which are forms that are given by the hospital at the time that a child is born to unwed parents.
Mm-hmm. Which would be in my case, yeah.
And then outside of that would be your DNA test.
Mm-hmm.
Many states do not recognize a birth certificate as a legally binding document of paternity,
Mm-hmm.
because that is a document that anyone's name can be placed on.
Right.
So when someone comes to us and they do not have the marriage or the acknowledgement and they request a paternity test, we give it to them.
Right.
We can't not give it to them. If they come to us with the paternity acknowledgement and they're like, yeah, I signed off on it. I thought this was my sweet bundle of joy, but I have since learned some circumstances and I have questions.
Right.
We at that point, and when I say we, it's because I try to differentiate between the child support agency and the court. So when
Right.
I say we, that means the child support agency.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have the authority to override that document because it's considered a legal document. So at
Yeah.
that point, you get scheduled to go before a judge. And when you go before a judge, you tell the judge, this is why I have my concerns now.
Right.
9 times out of 10, the judge will go ahead and order to go ahead and allow the paternity test.
Right.
In very rare circumstances, I've seen them not, but most of the time they just do, because what's the harm? No harm, no foul in doing that.
Right.
Let's make sure. I mean, that's in the best interest of the child, is to know who their father is.
Sure.
And that is a service that we provide. We do provide paternity only orders, which means you can come and apply to child support. You can get your DNA test, and then can close the case. No money
Right.
ordered, no child support, no cash switching hands whatsoever. And that is a wonderful thing for the child. If there is anyone wondering why that's a big deal, it is a big deal for your child's long-term
Mm-hmm.
future. For
Yeah.
example, if there is not anything establishing the father legally, and then he is, God forbid, harmed to the point of 100% disability or killed while at
Mm-hmm.
work or something, the child that has the paternity established can easily obtain their survivor's benefits. The
Right.
child that does not then has to jump through a whole lot of hoops. And there have even been some posthumous, oh, I never can do that one right, some DNA tests completed after the father is deceased, just to prove, for the purpose of those survivor benefits, that this is their child. So
Right.
handling that is in their long-term best interest. But those are some of the criteria for obtaining the incentives.
Yeah. So finishing up with the Title IV thing that we were discussing. So basically, what we're saying is, in a nutshell, to summarize, for those who don't know what Title IV is, it's federal money. It's matching dollars. For that, we ended on child support enforcement performance, and we
Mm-hmm.
got to that. We got to that point. So in North Carolina, and I think every state's different. Um, for every dollar that child support, I think, collects, they're matched 66 cents on the dollar. Um, wouldn't wouldn't you basically say, now what that's doing is, these agencies need funding, but wouldn't it be possible that less, let's say, virtuous state employees and people and whatnot, um, may look at this as a business, when you can keep a child from equal shared parenting by any means. So judge's discretion is about as loose of a silly little term that we use, because guess what? Our judges need to be held accountable for their decisions. They need to have criteria, which is why we need our legislators to create it. And the best people to help create that with our legislators are the people going through it, like you, maybe yourself or myself, or we are the experts.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are involved right now either know what they're doing or have no idea what they're doing, and both ways are dangerous. Either they're profiting and they know it, or like you said, some of your agents in the lower levels, they have no idea what we're even talking about right now. They have no idea what they're doing, what their job really is.
Chris, I've told you this before, and I'll reiterate again. Until I started talking to parents like yourself,
Right.
I had no idea.
Right. Because you're not trained to.
And I
You're
had no thought process of how could this benefit me? It benefits me because I get a paycheck. That's the benefit to doing my job.
and
And it doesn't occur to me.
how many agents think they're doing the best thing for a child by being like an enforcer of their financial well-being?
I would like to think that all of them do, because I would really hate to imagine that we have anyone there who would say, I don't really care about kids and I don't really care about families, and
Right.
I'm just here to collect a paycheck. So I would
Yeah,
really hope that they
because
all do.
because the
Because
pay
again, the
isn't
system isn't built for you.
right.
And so if you look at what the system was built for, the job that we do is good and meaningful and worthy and worthwhile.
But it's being
Now, when you look at
misused.
these loopholes that have been created and the way it's become weaponized,
Yeah.
which is a word that really was termed for me by another friend, and I couldn't wrap my brain around what he meant by that until I really got to talking to several individuals. Um, and it is weaponized, and this system is not built for your circumstances.
Right.
And the custodial parents, and I do try to use those terms because you mentioned very early on, we have as many females that are non-custodial parents at this point as we do males that are non-custodial parents. So it's not always mommy running in. Sometimes it's dad coming in because mom's not doing what she needs to be doing.
Well, no, I want to correct you there, unless I'm misunderstanding. You said that there's an equal amount of mother and father non-custodial custodial parents.
It's growing. It's not completely equal. That is what I said. It's not completely
Yeah,
equal, but
no,
it is growing.
it's absolutely not even close to equal. Typically, and these are statistics that I know are that 85% of your single parents are mothers, and not only that, but 90% of our welfare recipients are single mothers. The ratio of non-custodial parents between mothers and fathers is far spread. Obviously, with 85% of households, single parent households, are mothers. Well, that's not gonna tell you that. And I think 12% is the latest statistic. I'd have to check it up. I think it was from 2019 was the only one that I could find.
And of course, you're going to
Or
have some
single parent.
states that are higher in the
Sure. So
ratios than that.
yeah, no, I'm speaking throughout the United States. So
Right.
state by state, I don't know. What I do know is that mothers are strongly favored. Period. And
Well, I'll tell
that
you.
isn't against. I'm not saying that because I'm anti-women. I'm saying that because I'm anti the system
Right.
that has created this culture,
And you know,
that men
Chris,
are abusive and women are nurturers and men are not nurturers. I'm a nurturing fella.
oh, I
I'll
can
tell you
tell.
that. My little boy was crying when mommy came and picked
Hmm.
him up. And you know what I said? You know what I said, despite what their mother, and if their mother ever sees this, and I know my kids will see these videos one day, I said, I didn't say anything bad. I said, you know what, baby? Your mom loves you too. And she wants to see you also. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. I
You
made
know what?
that as pleasant as I could. I couldn't say, hey, you know what? Your mom is a terrible person. and she doesn't let me spend enough time with you, and I'm sorry, and blah, blah, blah. No, he's 4. And I put my grown up feelings aside, and I want him to love his mother. I want things to get better, and they probably never will. But it's my job only to love my kids and protect them. Like if there's something that's not true, I say I'm sorry, that's not true. But I don't go into the bashing aspect of it.
Because loving
But
our kids is more important than being angry at their other parent.
right, and I try to remember that every single time I speak to them is like, um, you know, going back to the nurturing thing and the whole custodial non-custodial thing. Because I don't want to get caught up in my feelings right there. I've not cried on this show yet. It's not going to happen now. So, um, yeah, it's it's terribly broken. The majority
It
of the
is.
people involved in it know it. We know it. You know it. What would you say before we sign off? And we'll leave it here, and we'll let everyone know when Sarah's going to come back. But what would you say to the other agents out there? Besides, I would say, listen to what Sarah and I have just talked about. Go educate yourself right now on what's really happening in the agencies that you work, because the job has noble intent, but intent does not distinguish nobility. What is really happening? And you're part of a system that you've been taught um, is for the best interest of our children, and it may be for some, and for others, it's destroying them. And morally, I know, we all got to do what we got to do and take care of our kids. And Sarah, you got to, that's your decision one day if you decide that this is a career field that you need to exit. And honestly, I hope you do. I hope you go find something else to do until we can make this, until the child support agency becomes what it was designed to be, and the court system becomes what it was designed to be or intended to be. And we, the parents, clean up this horrible industry that is family law, and child support's just under that umbrella of family law. What advice, before we sign off, would you give to other agents who are either aware, like you are, who are just learning about it, or who have no clue? Speak to your fellow child support agents.
I believe that once you are aware, you have to do something with your awareness. And so I would certainly encourage that. This show is something that I'm doing with my awareness. You and I have talked about some other decisions, and I'm a little torn.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me says, you know, get away from this.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of me says, but there's got to be some good guys on the inside if ever change is going to happen. So I'm torn,
Well, you're speaking
but
to
I'm
some
aware.
of the good guys right now too. So, yeah, you're having the opportunity to help make the system what it should be, and nothing more. It should not be crippling parents and keeping them from affording custody. First of all, we shouldn't be having custody battles. And if we have a high conflict situation, well, we need to deal with that with a presumption of shared parenting. Now, if someone's dangerous, well, that either has to be proven in a court of law, in a criminal court of law, not a civil court, not with a presumption or not with a discretionary, you know, how is it we talked about this. How can I be an every other weekend dad, but I can go open up a daycare and raise everyone else's children?
Mm-hmm.
I could be a doctor. I could be a police officer. I could be a judge. I can go get my law degree right now and be a family court judge. But my judge says I can only have every other weekend. How absurd and embarrassing is our legal system? They're embarrassing. And if any of you are watching, I know I have attorney friends that say it's embarrassing. You are an embarrassment to justice and to families and to children. Not you, Sarah. I'm not talking about you for those who are listening. I'm talking about this entire industry is absurd. It has no logic, you know? And of course, I want to say this to a judge when I'm in there because I'm right, but I also don't want to get locked up.
And
So
that would
there's
be
like
the
this
next
fine
thing.
line of not wanting to be locked up for being right, for doing the right thing, for actually
Right.
protecting your children, for saying no. I want to raise my kids. I want to financially be there, emotionally be there. I'm right here. Look at me. And instead, they sell us off as mothers or fathers that don't want to partake in our children's lives. I want to support my kids financially in my own
And
home.
that would be the biggest thing that I would say to other agents. When you have people sitting in front of you, they're looking at you as the expert. You need to make sure that you are doing what you're doing correctly and fairly.
Mhm.
You're not taking one person's word. Our entire job revolves around documentation, documentation, documentation. It doesn't matter if he may work on the side under the table making X amount of dollars. No documentation means no go. Do your job, do it fairly to
Do
both
your
parties.
your
You
due
are not
diligence.
to choose a side.
Mm-hmm.
You are to choose, again, going back to the mindset that this is to help children in some way.
Mm-hmm.
You are to choose the child. And by getting involved and taking sides, you're not choosing a child. You're not helping them in any shape, form, or fashion. And you are not advocating by your own behavior a world where the two parents can possibly begin to communicate amongst themselves and, God forbid, X us out of the communication.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find yourself in a child support court and you have any type of custody or visitation or even something that is just honored between you and the other parent verbally that gives you more than the every other weekend, talk to your agent. There are other ways to calculate child support. There is a split custody calculation, there is a shared custody calculation, and then there is what we're talking about mostly tonight, the basic that everyone else falls under.
What is it? The standard custody order? Is that what we call the standard?
It's kind of how I refer to it because it's what you typically hear is
Well,
the
that
every other weekend.
yeah. What an absurd standard. I mean, we need to raise our standards, kids.
Yeah,
I mean, who are we? We're letting the people that work for us tell us how things are need to be, and they're like, "Well, talk to your legislators." Well, we've been advocating since I was a little kid. I mean, there's been people out there since the 80s and 90s doing what I'm doing right now. Now, granted, technology is a little better. We can do things like this. You know, somebody who's absolutely broke can sit in front of a laptop with a microphone and broadcast to a few hundred, few thousand people. But yeah, I just want to say, Sarah, thanks for coming on. And we're
thank you
gonna
so
have
much.
no, I just provide the vessel. I appreciate you being willing to be one of the first agents. And I would encourage other child support agents to reach out to me and come on the show. And we'll do a whole show of active child support agents. And we'll this is how we change it. We change it by those being willing to speak. I understand the fear. There's fear involved for me when I speak out and say, hey, judges, attorneys, you're wrong. You're screwing
Sure.
up our children and stop it. As a 38-year-old man who loves his kids more than anything, we always talk about I would give my life for my children. And a lot of men and women might be losing their life because it hurts so bad. Instead of drowning in your sorrows and not knowing what to do, if you want to protect your kids, you're going to give your life for your kids. Speak out. And there, if there's but this is what life's about, is it not? Is it not about protecting your kids? It's sad that protecting our kids has to be protecting them from those who swore to protect them in the first place also,
Isn't
you
that the
know.
truth?
So we the parents have to do what we have to do, and that includes those who are involved in this broken system, who are obviously doing a lot better job than maybe some are aware that they may be causing a big part of the problem. And Sarah, thanks for coming on. And I want to we this is my first hour and a half show, so you got an extra 30 minutes. We had a little bit of a late start, but I'm glad to have you, and
Thank you.
we'll get you back here very soon, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.